Today, I want to talk about how the Broncos pulled off the greatest heist in NFL history and ask, what the hell is Pete Carroll doing?
It's Mr. Unlimited.
You'd have to be high to trade Russell Wilson.
You have to look at this and say that this is potentially on a historic level, one of the worst trades in the history of the NFL.
Broncos country. Let's ride.
Do you know how I know Nathaniel Hackett is a better coach than Pete Carroll?
Denver on their way to their 8th loss of the season.
Today, I want to answer the question, do the Denver Broncos really have the worst offense this century? Like many of you, I saw...
The Broncos won Super Bowl 50 in February of 2016. Now, they're the laughingstock of the NFL.
I was doing treatment on the plane. I was walking up and down the aisles. Everybody was knocked out. I was doing high knees and working on the...
They're saddled with an incompetent head coach running the show, an over-the-hill quarterback, and an albatross of a contract guaranteeing that QB will be in town for the foreseeable future. All of this coming after an offseason full of hope and hype. What went wrong? How did we get here? Why are the Denver Broncos so bad? They say giving is better than receiving, but giving obviously comes at a cost to your bank account. What if I told you there's a way to cut down your expenses without having to get off your couch? HelloFresh is a meal delivery service that saves you time, money, gas, all while tasting great. Plus, there are meals you can prepare in 20 minutes or less. HelloFresh is 72% cheaper than dining out and grocery shopping. The right portion ingredients reduce wasted food, and they have over 30 dinner recipes to choose from every week. Check out these beef flauta supreme I made. Legit, they were super quick and easy to make and tasted absolutely delicious. Whatever your dietary needs, HelloFresh has you covered. Veggie, pescatarian, fit and wholesome, it's all here to help you meet your goals. So after this video, head on over to HelloFresh.com and use code 5points18 for 18 free meals plus free shipping. Again, go to HelloFresh.com from the link below and use code 5points18 and get 18 free meals plus free shipping. Thank you, HelloFresh, for supporting this channel, and have fun giving. In the weeks after Denver bested Carolina and Santa Clara, Peyton Manning appropriately hung up his legendary cleats, ending an 18-year Hall of Fame career in the NFL. Denver had his replacement on their roster already. They had drafted Brock Osweiler as Manning's heir apparent all the way back in 2012, and after he had proven himself for 7 games, there was no doubt they would hitch their wagon to the rocket launcher. Only one problem: he didn't want to be there. Osweiler signed a long-term deal in Houston, sticking it to the team who had benched him in Week 17 and leaving the Broncos with just one quarterback on the roster, former 7th-round pick Trevor Siemian. Denver's QB situation was in dire straits, and the Osweiler surprise forced their hand in the draft. GM John Elway got desperate and traded up in the first round for Memphis quarterback Paxton Lynch. Now, Osweiler may not have been the long-term answer in Denver, but he would have saved them from the awful fate of drafting a quarterback who only knew the Fortnite map better than his playbook. That domino led to a quarterback carousel that has haunted the Mile High City for the last 7 years. Siemian, Lynch, the return of Brock Osweiler in 2017, Keenum, Flacco, Allen, Locke, Driscoll, Rippon, Hinton by way of Philip Lindsay, Teddy Bridgewater, and finally, Russell Wilson.
It's Mr. Unlimited.
It's a Brownsian level rotating door of quarterbacks in Denver. Not one of them surpassed 10 touchdown passes in a season. And the best of that bunch was probably Trevor Siemian, who turned in a serviceable effort in 2016 under Gary Kubiak. It's one thing to list all of the bad quarterbacks that the Broncos have trotted out, but it's another thing to understand why they've avoided finding a franchise quarterback like it's the plague. There have been a number of instances where the Broncos have had a top-flight signal caller in their sights, but for one reason or another failed to pull the trigger. Ironically, the first was all the way back in 2012. Just months after they made the greatest free agent signing perhaps in NFL history, they also committed a huge blunder in the draft. When Denver took Osweiler in the 2nd round, they balked at another quarterback, one who would join them a decade later. Denver had Russell Wilson in their building, and they let him go. Elway loved everything about Danger Russ. His athleticism, his arm, and his ability to extend the play. But he didn't love his height, The Duke opted for Osweiler because he was younger and taller. The rest, of course, is history. Denver ultimately regretted not taking Wilson, who would beat them in Super Bowl 48, and again when Osweiler bolted for Houston. Say what you want about Mr. Limited in 2022, but there's no doubt he would have been a worthy successor to Manning for half a decade. 4 years later, Denver was torn between Paxton Lynch and another QB, Mississippi State's Dak Prescott. Prescott had dinner with the Broncos in the pre-draft process, but missed a flight to Denver, and combined with the DUI, oh, you forgot about that, likely fell out of favor with the Broncos. Swing and a miss. 2 years later, the Broncos brass took a flight up to Laramie to watch Josh Allen play at Wyoming. Allen fit the mold of the prototypical Elway quarterback in just about every single way. Squint hard enough and he may have looked like John Elway himself. But when the time came to make the call, Elway and the rest of his draft balked at drafting another tall white QB with a big arm. A move seemingly out of character for Elway. It was as if he had been bullied and ridiculed into selecting Bradley Chubb, NC State's lengthy pass rusher, at 5 instead. That's not to say the Broncos had the right intention. If they had their pick of the litter, it's likely that Sam Darnold would have been a Bronco, even over Allen. And in a vacuum, the Broncos didn't swing and miss when they took Chubb. Denver got a Pro Bowl caliber edge rusher that they eventually flipped for a first rounder in 2022. But he certainly wasn't what they have desperately needed, a franchise-changing quarterback. Neither was Missouri quarterback Drew Lock, taken in the second round of the 2019 NFL Draft. Locke played at the end of his rookie season, taking over for a 3-8 team, and led the Broncos to 4 victories in their last 5 games. In hindsight, it's the worst thing that could have ever happened to Denver. In Locke's first start, he and the Broncos defeated Phillip Rivers and the Chargers on a buzzer-beater field goal. Thanks to their late season surge, Denver owed Locke a full season at starter, and even worse, they were leapfrogged in the draft by the Chargers. The Bolts took a favorite quarterback of Elway's, Justin Herbert, with the 6th overall pick. Had Herbert not returned to Oregon for his senior season, it's likely Elway would have made a play to get him in the 2019 draft, making no secret of his affection for Herbert, who currently lives in Emmanuel Acho's head rent-free.
Justin Herbert is a social media quarterback.
This series of bad moves would eventually lead to John Elway relinquishing his GM duties after the 2020 season, handing the reins to GM George Paton, and Paton was quickly faced with solving another quarterback dilemma. In 2020, Drew Lock had not fulfilled the promise of his rookie season, and Denver was in a position to draft a dynamic prospect to replace him, Ohio State's Justin Fields. In his first ever pick as GM, Paton opted for Alabama's shutdown cornerback Patrick Surtain II, turning down potential QB options like Fields and McCorkle Jones. Surtain is really good. He's an all-pro caliber player. As for Fields, he's waded through troubled waters in Chicago and taken a step forward in year 2. But if both players reach their full potential, Denver will have erred in not taking a star quarterback over a shutdown corner, no matter how good Surtain is. That's still an if, but with Denver's luck at quarterback, Fields will almost certainly blossom into a dual threat for the ages. Their folly of errors eventually forced their hand into trading for Russell Wilson, and that can be traced back to their decision to draft Brock Osweiler over Wilson in 2012. Of course, the Wilson that Denver traded for in 2022 appears so much unlike the quarterback we saw for the first decade of his career that the difference is staggering, and all it cost was 3 players and 5 draft picks. Yikes. Personnel aside, Denver has also been atrocious in picking their head coaches. It's rare that a head coach only lasts 2 seasons with a team when one of those years culminates in a Super Bowl title, but that's what happened when Gary Kubiak stepped down due to health issues after his 2nd season in the Mile High City. I said it's rare. By rare, I mean that's the only time it's ever happened. John Elway tapped Miami defensive coordinator Vance Joseph to replace Gary Kubiak, and in his first season as head coach in 2017, Joseph parlayed a 2-0 start into a 3-11 finish and dealt Denver their first losing season since 2010 when Josh McDaniels was running the show. Gee, I wonder if anyone's ever made a video about that. For the Broncos, that was the start of 6 straight losing seasons, the longest stretch the team has had since 1972, a stretch that will have any fan questioning their loyalty to the team and their own existential being. Joseph had the team at 6-6 in 2018, led by standout rookies Bradley Chubb and Phillip Lindsay, but the team sank down the drain and a 6-10 finish cost Joseph his job after just 2 seasons.
And here he is, having the time of his life.
Teams miss on head coaches all the time, Joe Judge, but it stings when they could have had someone much better. In that 2017 cycle when the Broncos landed on Joseph, they also passed up on Kyle Shanahan, whose connection to Denver is very much a family affair. Unresolved bad blood between father Mike Shanahan and team president Joe Ellis stemming from Shanahan's firing in 2008 may have kept the younger Shanny from taking his father's old post. And say what you want about Shanahan and blown leads in the Super Bowl, hey, at least he got to the Super Bowl. 2 years later, Denver replaced Joseph with Vic Fangio, a longtime defensive coordinator whose resume made him appear overqualified for a first-time head coaching gig. It's true that technically Fangio has been Denver's best head coach since Gary Kubiak, but that's not exactly a high bar. Fangio, like his quarterback Drew Lock, showed promise down the stretch in 2019 and again in 2021 when the team started 3-0, but failed to get the squad over the hump in 3 seasons. He wasn't a player's coach. He forbade music at practice, opting for heavy workloads and adopting the my way or the highway mentality. Again, the pendulum swung too far the other way, and the Broncos ended up with Nathaniel Hackett, whose eternal optimism has been tested through 13 games. If you remove all the factors Hackett cannot control, like injuries, he has been awful. His play calling, decision making, lack of preparation, and overall cluelessness alone have directly cost the Broncos several wins. It seems like every week someone is questioning whether or not he makes it farther than Urban Meyer did his first year, and Meyer got caught on tape finger blasting some bar slut after a loss. Speaking of that, that's where we currently find the Denver Broncos. They're a train wreck, but not in the usual way. They've had a losing record for 6 straight years, but they've always had a good roster, especially on defense. It just goes to show you that one small mistake can end up leading to hundreds. And that's why the Denver Broncos are so bad.
Broncos country. Let's ride.